Episode 1. The Call, the Warrior. Before the mountain, before the victory, before the world knew your name, there was a choice, and every great story begins the same way. With a call, not everyone hears it. Most are too distracted, too comfortable, too busy running from themselves. But a few hear something. A whisper, a pull, a feeling they cannot explain, a feeling that says there is more than surviving, more than repeating the same days, more than accepting the limits handed to them by fear, failure, or the opinions of others. If you are hearing this, then perhaps you know exactly what I mean. Perhaps you have felt it since childhood. That strange feeling that you were meant for something different, not greater than others. Different. A river does not compare itself to a mountain. A mountain does not compare itself to the stars. Each has its purpose. And so do you. There is an old story. A young man once stood before a master and asked, "How do I find my purpose?" The master handed him a seed. Nothing more. No explanation. No wisdom. Just a seed. The young man was confused. "What am I supposed to do with this?" The master replied, "The same thing you are supposed to do with your life." The young man left frustrated. Years passed. He carried the seed wherever he went, across deserts, through storms, across cities and villages, always asking the same question, always searching for an answer. One day, exhausted and defeated, he sat beside a river. For the first time in years, he stopped searching. And when he opened his hand, the seed was still there. Then he finally understood. The seed was never meant to be carried. It was meant to be planted. Welcome to solid ground. There is another story, a simpler one. A seed is placed into the earth, and from the seed's perspective, everything looks wrong. The light disappears. The warmth disappears. The world it once knew disappears. It is surrounded by darkness, buried beneath the soil. Alone. If the seed could think, it might believe its life was over. It might believe it had been forgotten, abandoned, buried. But what the seed does not understand is that there is a difference between being buried and being planted. One is the end of a story. The other is the beginning. Warrior, how many times have you mistaken one for the other? How many times have you looked at your circumstances and assumed life was moving against you? How many times have you looked at a closed door and called it failure? How many times have you looked at a setback and called it defeat? The fighter loses a match and questions their path. The artist is ignored and questions their gift. The dreamer falls short and questions their purpose. Yet the earth asks none of these questions of the seed. It simply says, grow, even in darkness. Grow, even in uncertainty. Grow, even when no one sees you. Because some of the most important work in life happens underground. Before the tree reaches the sky, roots reach into the earth. Before anyone celebrates the victory, there are years of unseen preparation. Before the sword is raised in triumph, it must endure the forge. The world celebrates what is visible, but nature teaches us that what is invisible often matters more. The roots, the foundation, the preparation, the becoming. Perhaps this season of your life is not about being seen. Perhaps it is about growing. Perhaps the reason nobody understands your journey is because roots are not meant to impress anyone. Their purpose is to hold the tree steady when the storm arrives, and storms always arrive. That is another lesson the mountain teaches. The goal was never to avoid hardship. The goal was to become strong enough to stand through it. So if you find yourself in a season of darkness, remember the seed. Remember that growth is often invisible before it becomes undeniable. Remember that being planted can feel very similar to being buried. And remember this: the oak tree was once a seed that refused to surrender to the darkness around it. Perhaps you are being asked to do the same, not to have all the answers, not to know exactly where the path leads, simply to grow where you are planted. One day you will look back on this season and understand what it was preparing you for. One day the roots you are growing now will support a life you cannot yet imagine. But first, you must trust the process. The seed does not become a tree overnight, and the warrior does not become who they were meant to be in a single battle. Both are built the same way. One season, one challenge, one day at a time. There comes a moment in the life of every seed when remaining the same becomes impossible. For a time, the seed rests beneath the soil, growing roots, gathering strength, preparing for what comes next. But eventually, something remarkable happens. The shell begins to crack. From the outside, it looks like damage. From the outside, it looks like the seed is breaking apart. But nature understands a truth that many people forget. Sometimes the thing that feels like it's breaking you is actually opening you. Think about your own life. The heartbreak, the loss, the disappointment, the failure, the fight you lost, the opportunity that slipped away, the season when nothing seemed to go according to plan. How many times have you looked at those moments and called them setbacks? And yet, years later, those same moments became turning points. The relationship that ended taught you self-respect. The defeat taught you humility. The struggle taught you discipline. The loneliness taught you who you really are. Life has a strange way of disguising gifts as obstacles. The seed does not become a tree by staying comfortable. It becomes a tree by breaking open. And perhaps that is where you stand today. Perhaps something in your life is cracking. A belief, an identity, an old version of yourself. And because it hurts, you assume something has gone wrong. But what if something has gone right? What if the life you are trying to build requires the version of you that exists on the other side of this challenge? The caterpillar must surrender its old form. The seed must surrender its shell. The sword must surrender to the forge. Transformation asks the same question of all things. What are you willing to leave behind in order to become what you were meant to be? This is the question every warrior must answer. Not once, many times. Because growth is not a single event. It is a series of deaths and rebirths. The death of excuses, the death of fear, the death of limitation, and the birth of something stronger, something wiser, something closer to your true nature. The world often celebrates the finished product, the champion, the master, the victory, but rarely does it celebrate the breaking that came before it. Yet that breaking is where the story changes. That breaking is where the warrior is born. And perhaps that is why you are here. Not because your life is falling apart, but because something greater is trying to emerge. The diamond cannot remain beneath the earth forever. The seed cannot remain beneath the soil forever. The warrior cannot remain in preparation forever. Eventually, the moment arrives. The moment when thought becomes action. The moment when possibility becomes reality. The moment when the path asks a question. Not who you hope to become, not who you wish to become, but who you are willing to become. This is the arena. Most people misunderstand the arena. They think it is a place, a ring, a stage, a battlefield, a competition. Sometimes it is. But the true arena is much closer than that. The true arena is the moment you choose courage over comfort. It is the moment you take the first step, despite uncertainty. The moment you submit the application. The moment you enter the gym. The moment you launch the business. The moment you share the art. The moment you stop waiting for permission and begin. That is the arena. And every warrior enters it alone. Not because they have no support, but because no one can take the step for them. There is an old saying, the ship is safest in the harbor. But that is not what ships were built for. Think about that. You were not built merely to exist. You were not given gifts so they could remain hidden. You were not forged by struggle, so you could spend your life avoiding challenge. You were built for the open sea. You were built for the mountain. You were built for the journey. Yet many spend their lives standing at the edge of the water, studying the waves, analyzing the wind, waiting for certainty, waiting for guarantees, waiting for a future that never arrives. The warrior understands something different. The sea will never be perfectly calm. The mountain will never lower itself. The path will never remove every obstacle. And so the warrior moves anyway. Not because they know they will succeed, because they know remaining still is no longer an option, because something inside them has awakened, something stronger than fear, something stronger than doubt, something stronger than comfort, purpose. And once purpose awakens, the old life can no longer contain it. The seed pushes through the soil, the tree reaches toward the sky. The warrior enters the arena, not because they are ready, because they are called. And perhaps that is where you stand right now, at the edge, one decision away, one step away, one act of courage away. The arena is waiting. The question is, will you enter? The choice. Warrior, if you remember nothing else from this message, remember this. There will come a day when you meet yourself. Not the person you are today, the person your choices create. One version will carry regret. The other will carry wisdom. One will spend years wondering what might have happened. The other will know. Not because they won every battle, not because they never failed, but because they answered the call. They planted the seed. They endured the pressure. They survived the breaking. They entered the arena. And they discovered something remarkable. The mountain was never standing in their way. The mountain was revealing who they were. Perhaps that is what your challenges have been doing all along, not stopping you, revealing you. The pressure, the darkness, the breaking, the arena. Every step preparing you for the next. Every lesson shaping the person you are becoming. And if you found this message today, perhaps it is not by accident. Perhaps this is simply the moment you were ready to hear it. The moment you stop asking why the path is difficult and start understanding what the path is creating. Warrior, the future is not waiting for you. It is being built by the choices you make today. The path is before you. The mountain is before you. The journey is before you. Take the first step. And when the road becomes difficult, remember the diamond. Remember the seed. Remember the breaking. remember the arena, because everything you seek may already be seeking you, and perhaps this is where it begins. Welcome to solid ground.